All right, everyone, we are going to go ahead and get started. I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar, Safe Students, Safe Workers, Construction Safety Programs in Post-Secondary Career Technical Education. My name is Jessica Bunting, and I'm the CPWR host and tech support for the event. So if you're experiencing any technical difficulties at any time, please contact me using your chat box or by responding to any of the WebEx emails you've received. You should have just gotten a reminder email about an hour ago, so you can just reply to that. If you're having trouble hearing through your computer speakers, we recommend calling in using your phone instead. And that call-in information can be found in any of the WebEx emails or by clicking on the Event Info tab at the top of your screen to change your connection. We will take some time at the end of today's presentation to answer questions, but you can enter them at any time in the Q&A box or the chat box, and I will do my best to read them out in the order that we receive them, and we'll answer as many as possible at the end. But to make sure that I do see your questions, please address them either to everyone or to me, the host, and not privately to our presenters. Finally, today's webinar will be recorded. So if you're interested in reviewing or sharing the information with colleagues, we will make that available to everyone after the event. I will be emailing you all by the end of the week with that. Okay, our speakers today are Diane Bush, Program Coordinator for the Labor Occupational Health Program at University of California, Berkeley, and Andrew Wermis, the Consultant for Skilled and Technical Sciences at the Iowa Department of Education. All right, and with that, I will hand it over to you, Diane.
Great. Thank you, Jessica, and thanks to all of you for joining us today. Today, Andy and I are going to talk about resources for administrators and instructors in construction training programs at the community college or technical school level, so two-year post-secondary colleges. What systems do they need to have in place to best prepare students so that when those students get out into the workplace, they return home safely from their jobs every day? What we're sharing today is the result of a 3-year study that is nearing its end, and my co-PI on the project is Kimberly Rauscher at West Virginia University's Injury Control Research Center. And I also want to acknowledge our other research team members, including Doug Myers at Kimberly's shop and Charlotte Chang and Kelsey Scruggs here at LOHP. As you probably know, this project is funded through CPWR with funding from NIOSH, the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health. And we've also had two key national education partners, the Association of Career Technical Education and the National Council for Workforce Education, as well as an amazing advisory group, which Andy's part of, and has also included other CTE construction instructors and administrators, experts in construction health and safety education, and representatives from a number of different national CTE organizations. So while I just said we're talking about construction programs at the post-secondary level, a lot of what we have to share will also, we hope, be useful at the secondary level or other adult ed programs in the K-12 system that deal with construction training. So over the course of the project, we were looking to first try to figure out what kind of program elements support effective health and safety education in these programs. Second, to see if we could find out what was happening out in the world of CTE construction programs at the two-year community college level in regard to these elements. And then finally, from what we learned, to put together tools that we could share with that would help administrators and instructors improve their programs. And so we're going to be doing a little bit of both of those today, sharing some of our research results as well as giving you an introduction to the resource tools. Why do we think this is important? Why do we care about this? There are something like 78,000 students involved in 6-month to 2-year construction programs in a given year, and we're not here talking about apprenticeship programs, even though some of those are run through community colleges. So we're really focusing on programs that are not part of a formal apprenticeship program. These students are new and young, and by definition at higher risk for injury. And we know that many of them are going to be entering residential construction work, which is on the more hazardous end of the construction industry. So by the end of the presentation today, hopefully you will have at least a basic introduction to some of the key program elements that we found to be important, a little bit about our research results in terms of what's going on out in the CTE world generally, and then an introduction to the guide and the assessment tools that we've developed that include specific action steps. So we won't be able to share everything, but we want to introduce you enough that hopefully you'll go check out the tools. The research that we did involved focus groups with subject matter experts who were instructors and administrators in the CTE world. We conducted a national online survey of 270 CTE administrators and instructors from 63 schools across 34 states. And we also conducted 3 site visits where we interviewed instructors, the administrator for the program, as well as students, and did some classroom observation. And then very helpful, regular, active input from our advisory group. We also got some help when we were doing recruitment for the survey from a number of other organizations, so all the organizations you see listed there. So how are we defining effective health and safety education? Working with existing industry and education standards, so seeing what's already out there, and then talking to the subject matter experts in our focus groups and our advisory group, we identified core health and safety competencies that students should have by the end of a program in order to really be health and safety competent workers. So both able to protect themselves, but also with the skills, sort of bigger thinking, critical thinking skills to contribute to creating a safer workplace. So you can see here we focus on basic hazard identification and control, so having the knowledge and skills to recognize specific hazards and safely do specific tasks, but also the problem solving and critical thinking and communication skills they need to address these problems on a real job site. And this is not a complete list, but you can find our complete list at the end of the guide. Okay, and so the resulting guide describes 14 key elements in 4 general areas. So we were looking at what needs to happen at the administrative level in terms of support, but also in terms of safety systems. What needs to happen at the instructor level? What qualifications do they need and what kind of support do they need to do a good job? What needs to happen in the classroom in terms of curriculum and teaching methodology? And then finally, if there is an off-site learning, like an internship or other learning opportunity, what things need to be in place there, what safety and health management practices need to be in place. So the guide that we've put together describes these 14 key elements, and if you didn't have a chance to check it out, you can now go to its new location on the CPWR website, and we're going to have a shorter address in the future. We're just making that transition right now. And this guide is designed for both administrators and instructors. And we know from the work that we've been doing that many administrators need some basic awareness about their own health and safety responsibilities, and also help in understanding what they can do to support and hold their instructors accountable. And instructors need concrete tools and resources to be able to improve the safety systems and education that takes place in their classrooms. So one example is, this is an example of one element, so the importance of support for engaging industry advisory committees. So for each of these elements in the guide, we give a little description of what that looks like when it's functioning well in a system. So the what this looks like section, Where possible, we've also provided examples that we collected from the field, either from site visits or from our subject matter experts or even from the survey of examples of how programs are putting these things into place. And then on the right-hand side, you'll see we tried to share some of our research, again, not trying to bombard people, but to share some of the key information so they can see kind of where their program fits in with the rest of the CTE world, or at least the construction training part of that world. And then for each of these, we provide specific action steps that administrators and instructors can take, and where possible, we've provided links to resources that will help them do that. And on the right-hand side, I've shared how we have collected all those resources at the end, as well as provided some additional teaching and other resources. So trying to give people everything we think they might need to do this work. And then the other thing that we've developed are 2 short self-assessment tools. These are online. They're totally anonymous. They're just tools for folks to use to at least get an initial hit on kind of how they're doing. Again, not comprehensive. They were each designed to take about 10 minutes to complete. But it gives you a sense of how you're doing. At the end, you get a little score, either doing well, needs improvement, or middle of the road for each of the elements that we asked about. So again, this is not comprehensive, but a good way to bring people into thinking about their programs and what they may or may not have in place. So now at this point, so this is kind of your basic introduction to the tools that are available, and what we'd like to do for the next part of the presentation is share a little bit about a few of those program areas. So again, just giving you an introduction. Andy will share a couple of questions, like the questions you might find on the assessment, and then discuss some of the recommended action steps and give some concrete examples. And then I will chime in and share a little bit about what we found in the research for that particular program element. So Andy, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thank you, Diane. So in terms of assessing your programs that are doing well function as safety and health management systems. There are many components within a safety and health management system, and the study examined the function of a community college institutional safety and health management system, then focused on the function of the construction program safety and health plan within that institutional safety and health management system. One best practice the study's guidance document identified and listed as a resource is OSHA's new published Recommended Practices for Safety and Health Programs in Construction. This framework is an excellent guide for components that should be in your program's safety and health plan, including management leadership, worker participation, hazard identification and assessment, hazard prevention and control, education and training, program evaluation and improvement, and communication and coordination for employers on multi-employer work sites. Examples of questions the study asked that would help you examine the effectiveness of your current safety and health program are: does your program have regular internal inspections to ID hazards? Are students involved in those inspections? Does management prioritize solutions that engineer out identified hazards? So, for safety and health management systems, at the administrative level, we were looking at the school's overall commitment to health and safety. Do your institutional practices reflect a strong safety and health management system, including management commitment, training, communication, employee involvement, hazard ID, reporting and abatement systems, etc.? And a great resource for inspections, also recommended in the document resources area, is the NIOSH Safety Checklist Program for schools. Each chapter of this online book builds on the preceding one to develop a workable plan for implementing a checklist program. Programs can actively involve students in learning how to recognize and abate hazards by breaking students into groups and having them utilize a part of the inspection checklist to inspect areas of the shop And of course, you'll be expecting students to find the bugs you planted prior to their inspection. And for teaching and learning applications, the connection here would be how students learn to deal with hazards that are identified. Does the program teach hazard recognition using the job hazard analysis process? Do students practice the process? So the best practice here would be proactive investigations and prioritizing the most effective abatement strategy for an identified or potential hazard. Diane?
Great, thanks. And I'm realizing we did include hot links to both of those resources that Andy mentioned, but they're at the end of the slideshow, so just so you know that. So what did we find out in the field? Overall, although many schools had components of safety and health management systems in place, there were some surprising gaps in a number of them, and we've just pulled out a couple of results to focus on here. About half of instructors reported doing regular internal safety and health inspections, and survey folks also reported that often the people who were doing the inspections weren't maybe as knowledgeable as they needed to be, so they saw a need for more training for folks who were doing the inspections. And then while most administrators and instructors agreed that their classrooms had safe, up-to-date equipment, which we were actually surprised to find that, only about 30% of them report that engineering controls are prioritized in addressing hazards. And as Andy pointed out, that's really a key component of OSHA requirements, that whenever possible, you find ways to address the hazards without having to rely on personal protective equipment. And I do also want to point out that we know that, or we expect that our results really do reflect maybe a slightly rosier picture than what's happening out there, just because of who we think ended up probably taking the survey. They obviously had enough interest to participate in this. So just so that you keep that in mind as we report the survey results. All right, Andy? Andy? Andy, are you there?
He appears to still be on.
I know. Okay. Well, let me jump in here, and Andy, if you come back on, just interrupt me. So some of the questions that we've asked in the survey and in the self-assessment tool you'll see related to instructor qualifications and support, we're looking at what kind of preparation and training instructors have. So have you as an instructor, have your instructors taken the OSHA 30 or the 500, 510 that allows you to be an authorized OSHA trainer and give do OSHA 10 training for your students? So that's one question. Second, do instructors have paid time to recruit and work with your industry advisory committee members? And third, do instructors receive training on how to be effective instructors? So what we're, the action steps, Andy, are you, I see now that you're muted. Are you there? He's just obviously having a problem with his speaker.
Yeah. Andy, message me please if you need me to change your phone line or something.
Okay. All right. So the action steps that we recommend in the guide include the importance of including safety and health teaching goals in professional development plans. So we think it's important for the instructors. So Jessica, you see he wants to be on the cell?
Yeah, I'm making a change.
All right. And also the importance of strengthening and updating teaching skills. I keep wanting to tell you what we found in the survey results, which is my next section, but we'll get to that. And then the second important, another important area in terms of instructor support is just the importance of having systems in place to support important efforts. For example, setting up their industry advisory committee in a way that the Industry Advisory Committee is clear about what their role is, clear ways for them to be involved, like actually bringing them out to your sites and finding ways to hold them accountable.
Okay, can you hear me?
Oh, yeah, you're there.
Okay,
so I
sorry
might
about that.
So I'm going to keep going, and I'll report on these research results and then hand it back to you for the next.
Okay.
Okay. So in terms of what we found, we did find that all schools require industry experience, so at least 2 years of industry experience, although only 48% required the 5 years that has ended up in our guide as kind of the recommended practice. The majority of programs didn't require teaching experience or training ahead of time. And many schools have systems to provide this training on the job, but it also seemed to be an area where more work is needed, and we've highlighted mentoring programs as an important step to, or an important thing to put in place in programs. We also found that only 25% of programs required instructors to have an OSHA 30, although about half of them required an OSHA 10. But when we were out in doing our site visits, we didn't actually find very many instructors at all who had the OSHA 10. And even in one of the schools where they have a pretty robust requirement for all the students to have an OSHA 10, and the students got that from a standalone class in another system within the school, the instructors themselves hadn't had the OSHA 10, and they didn't have a plan or a system for integrating the specific things that students were learning in their OSHA 10 in their classes, which is, again, an important or a key recommendation that we have of the importance of integrating that very dense OSHA 10 content into a practicing class, into a skills practice class. In addition, in terms of the Industry Advisory Council, we found that despite the support described by administrators, so administrators said, you know, yes, we provide systems for this, barely half of the instructors said they would be very likely to consult their Industry Advisory Committee, and even fewer felt that their Industry Advisory Committees were critical to their programs. And the quote you see here is from one of the site visit administrators where they had a pretty good system in place that was working. So the systems are important, and then backing them up is also critical. Okay, so now I'm going to give it back to you, Andy.
Okay, so hopefully you can hear me.
Yes.
Sorry for the technical difficulty here. So I'm going to duck back just a minute on the Industry Advisory Committee because I'm not sure if you covered the bullets that I was going to cover. Did you?
I did.
Oh, you did. Okay.
Yeah.
Then I'll go ahead then from there. Okay, so in the teaching and learning questions, assessing the programs where we're at. So they're central to determining the effectiveness of the health and safety program. And the questions would be, are students required to have the OSHA 10 training, we asked? Is safety and health training integrated throughout all skills courses? And how are you doing that? Through what kinds of activities? Do students practice communicating with supervisors about safety and health concerns? And the key to successful learning and practicing of health and safety knowledge, skills, and abilities is, are students operationalizing the safety, knowledge, and skills they are learning in authentic workplace applications? So let's briefly look at some components of operationalizing health and safety. Why do we do that? Construction work sites are ever evolving. As structures go up, conditions are ever changing. Your work processes change. Work processes being performed around you change. The environment changes. Workers must be able to constantly predict and avoid potential safety hazards, and plan ahead to employ processes and use equipment that ensures that work is performed safely. So training students in authentic work environments is important. Operationalizing health and safety means that first, we need to ensure that students receive foundational safety and health training, the OSHA 10 content, but then students should consistently apply and practice that knowledge and those skills throughout every course, continuously adding specific safety training where required, and developing and operationalizing safety and health critical thinking skills. So how do we do that? Well, this graphic illustrates an operationalized OSHA 10-hour training that results in an expanded 12-plus hours to include the concentrated integration of the hazard recognition process through designed, authentic work site typical activities and utilizing job hazard analysis and the implementation of the hierarchy control process to tie the designed activities into every 10-hour required safety topic listed around the outside ring. It's important for students to learn to utilize the NIOSH hierarchy of controls as they identify and abate hazards in authentic work environments through exercises they complete in problem-based projects throughout the program. The hierarchy of controls is used as a means of determining how to implement feasible and effective control solutions. The control methods at the top of the graphic are potentially more effective and protective than those at the bottom. So following this hierarchy normally leads to the implementation of inherently safer systems where the risk of illness and injury has been substantially reduced. Control operations are identified and the most feasible, effective, and permanent solutions are selected. So this is an example of the application of the hierarchy of controls to eliminate potential fall hazards. Although personal fall arrest systems are the most widely used form of fall protection in residential construction, they might not be suitable when workers begin installing roof trusses because they may not be a stable place to attach a personal fall arrest system anchorage. Trusses are designed to support weight from the top down. Until trusses are properly restrained and braced, they're weak if pulled from the side. In other words, subjected to lateral forces as they would occur when a truss-mounted fall protection system bears the full weight of a falling worker. So in this case, a hanging system, a scaffold system, provides a safe elevated work platform for installing trusses. And even though the PFAS anchorages could be attached to a braced-off roof truss system for installing roof sheeting, the same hanging scaffold system still serves as the better choice when using the NIOSH hierarchy of controls. And in addition, setting up a construction trades lab to replicate an authentic workplace is key to training students in an authentic workplace environment. So these are just a few examples of required processes that should be incorporated as safety stations. So safety is learned and practiced in real-time authentic conditions in your program. Diane?
So what did we find? We found that just over 50% of programs actually required the OSHA 10 and or the OSHA 30 for their students, so 55%. And while instructors who taught it did report spending more than 10 hours on it, so more like the 12 hours or even I think 15 or 20 some indicated, very few of them actually taught it within a trade skills class. It was taught standalone, and about 6% of the programs reported that students were taking it online. Another area that we focused on was whether and how self-advocacy and critical thinking skills were taught. And we found that about half of instructors spend less than an hour on problem solving and self-advocacy skills, and 32% of them never covered engineering and administrative controls So they never covered what Andy was just going over, the importance of understanding the hierarchy of controls and what are the most protective mechanisms, because we really want these students to be able to think beyond the safety rules. We want them to really have these kinds of critical thinking skills. As our one instructor points out clearly with this quote, construction sites are hazard-riddled. Students need to recognize the hazards. If they do recognize something, they got to raise the question to speak your mind and think for yourself, because the idea is to make it home every night. So overall, throughout this project, I mean, we found there's an obvious strong interest and commitment to health and safety, especially among instructors. And we heard about this through our focus groups, at our site visits, through the advisory group, and even through the survey results. We were very pleased with the thoroughness with which people threw themselves into taking a fairly long survey. But there are clearly significant gaps evidenced by our results, and likely, as I mentioned earlier, to be even bigger gaps out in the rest of the CTE construction community. CTE deans sometimes seem to have little understanding of the safety systems that existed in their schools or were needed in their programs, and they weren't providing the support and accountability that instructors needed. And both administrators and instructors really want and need concrete steps and access to tools that will help them strengthen their systems. So we hope that our guide and our assessment tools will be a first step in that direction, and we're looking forward to adding more resources as we move further and try to do more work in this area. And then here are the hot links also to the two tools that Andy mentioned earlier, OSHA's recommended practices for safety and health programs in construction, which really provided a frame for our recommended practices in the guide, and also the NIOSH Safety Checklist program, which is a great resource for schools. So I think I'll stop there. Thank you very much, and I'm happy to take some questions.
Thank you, Diane, and thank you, Andy. Again, go ahead and enter any questions you might have. I did just want to point out that we can't use the hand raise function because I'm unable to unmute you so that you speak. So if you do have a question, please make sure you're typing it into either the chat or the Q&A box. Okay, and we do have a couple questions and comments that already came in. So the first is actually more of a recommendation suggesting that these programs consider incorporating learning hazards as energy sources. If you refer to the continued comments down in your Q&A boxes, he gives some information about Decision Point Associates and Mike Fleming if you want more information about this. Okay, and then second, is a question on whether the PowerPoint will be available, and I can go ahead and answer that. We will be sending it out. I'll be sending an email by the end of the week that includes both a recording of this event and a PDF of the PowerPoint slides. Okay. Let's see, there was another question. What about encouraging these programs to become accredited by a legitimate and independent body such as ABET, A-B-E-T. ABET is the accrediting body for occupational safety, industrial hygiene, and construction management programs at AS, CS, and MS levels. Are you familiar with that, or did that come up at all in this project?
That didn't come up specifically. I don't know, Andy, if you have anything to say. So that one, I will take the recommendation and look into it further. Andy, did you have any comment about that?
So I'm aware that that ABET has, those requirements would be part of their certification of programs. The focus of this was basically preparing students to work safely in the construction industry and identifying best practices for that. So in terms of formalizing into what would be submitted to ABET for a certification type of a review, I'm familiar with the process you're talking about. I don't know of programs necessarily that have done that at this point.
Okay. The next question is, you spoke much of what to do, but did you uncover any what not to do?
Well, we went into the project, you know, we started with our subject matter experts and our advisory group and sort of existing best practice recommendations. So we kind of went out looking for those things to see whether those things existed in the field. So we weren't necessarily, you know, I mean, there are certainly things that we included in our questions that weren't necessarily ideal, like what kinds of teaching methodology, and if people only put lecture down, then that's, you know, that's certainly not what we're looking for. But yeah, we weren't specifically looking for that. Andy, anything to add to that?
No, other than the fact that the decision we arrived at a certain point was that the publication from OSHA on the recommended practices for safety and health programs in construction would be a very good framework for what we were trying to describe in terms of you know, operationalizing best practices in a format that would train students to be functional when, you know, in terms of at a health and safety level that would protect them and those around them well when they enter the industry. So.
Okay. Jessica, can I just add something that just came to my mind before we, I don't know whether there are people on the call today who participated in the survey or in any aspect of the project, and I just wanted to let them know that we are going to be sending you a full announcement. We've been sort of waiting to get the website piece of it fully put together, so I just wanted to say a personal thank you if you did participate in the project, and you can expect to get an email announcement from us hopefully next week. So just wanted to remember to say that.
Okay. Our next question is, have you looked at augmented or virtual reality in training?
So we didn't ask about that in the survey, but we did observe that in one of our site visits, and it did, this was a virtual reality welding tool that we saw at one site, and it did seem like, and we did include it in the guide as a, you know, as an example of a practice that has good potential to reduce the exposure to hazards for the new learners who are just learning welding. So again, we didn't ask about that specifically, and I didn't really look. I'm trying to remember if it came up in sort of the open-ended questions on the survey. I don't remember seeing that as a recommendation. But yeah, that definitely seems like it has potential as a starting place for some foundational learning.
Sure. Okay. The next question is, what is the biggest single gap in content of the training being offered in the schools you surveyed? What areas are not getting safety education currently?
I'm not sure if our data is strong enough to say, you know, this is the specific gap, but we do, the ones that we highlighted today, I mean, and that we're particularly interested in were the lack of training and practice around advocacy skills and also around understanding the big picture in terms of health and safety, understanding the importance of the hierarchy of controls and of setting up a job safely, as opposed to simply, learning the safety rules and following those rules. That really, for construction workers, as many of you are well aware, having the ability to respond to constantly changing environments is what really that's the important skill. And it didn't come across as something that people were spending a lot of time on.
I'm not actually sure if this is a question that you'll be able to answer, but I am an OSHA outreach instructor and building trades teacher. Should I also have a 30-hour card?
No, I think the answer, you need to have the 500 and the 510, which you obviously have if you're an OSHA outreach instructor. So my understanding is the 10 is kind of the basic, and then, and I'm sure there's someone, maybe I shouldn't answer this question, but the 10 is the basic, and then the 30 is I think typically conceived of for like the supervisor level, although I know many programs, there were certainly a number of programs that required the 30 for their students. But you don't need that to do the 500 and 510, because I think the content stuff is covered in one of those.
That's my understanding of it as well. Yeah. Okay. I believe, sorry,
yes,
Andy?
The completion of the 500, 510 training authorizes you to deliver the 30-hour and also award the, submit the completion names to OSHA for the issuance of that 30-hour card. So.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Hold on. We're just getting comments that you're correct in your descriptions of the OSHA. I think that is actually it for questions. If anyone does end up having a question that was not answered during the event today, feel free to email me at any time or to get in touch with our presenters directly, and we will make sure that we get those questions answered. So thank you for everyone who attended, and thank you so much, Diane and Andy, for doing this.
Jessica, can I add one last thing?
Absolutely.
So I forgot to mention that we are currently trying to put together a very small study to look at how can we support administrators in particular in implementing improvements to their program. And so if you have any interest in that or know somebody who might, we're going to try to work with a small group of CTE administrators over construction programs to look at our guide and figure out pieces of it that they may want to try to implement and try to support that effort. So please email me if you're interested in participating in that. Thank you.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.